Welcome, horror fam, to HHN 365, a Halloween Horror Nights podcast. My name is Mike, and I'm here with my co-hosts Duff and Jonathan. I believe it's probably the last week that we're missing Jess.
Yes, this should be our last week without Jess, so expect us to be supervised coming soon.
As always, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at HHN365 and at TikTok at HHN365pod. We have an amazing Discord. The link is in the description, and our merch shop, hhn365.com. You can always leave us a voicemail at 407-906-4134. On today's show, we are going to be going over quite a few news and rumors, as well as our main segment is kind of The Last of Us for Dummies, where we go over some very basic overview of some Last of Us terminology for those who don't want to do all their homework and just want to listen to a brief 20-minute filler to fill them in.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of needed it myself. I haven't played the game in about a decade at this point, so nice little refresher for even those of us who have played at some point.
Yeah, but before we get to that, we do have lots of stuff. So first, our show updates. Duff, take us away on that.
Yeah. So we've been talking about HHN 36 Live, which is our live event on TikTok that we do. We're supposed to do monthly. We unfortunately missed last month, and we had it scheduled for this coming Wednesday. And unfortunately, we do have to cancel again. There is just no way for all of us to be there. Yeah. And by all of us, I mean there's no way for more than one of us to be there at a time coming up. So we are not going to set a date. Not going to set it even tentatively. We're going to wait till we are all kind of back to normal. There's a lot of stuff going on. Once we are, we'll find a date we can all definitely be there, or at least some of us can be there at the same time, and we'll get it going again then.
Yeah, we're not all in the same city right now either, so it's tough during the summer. There's just a lot of moving parts right now. So, but that shouldn't be like that forever.
No, I think we should be good next month. When next month? Not sure, but next month. Also, HHN Quiplash. We've announced that recently. It is finally coming back. We are doing it once again with the HHN at Home event, which this year is not just one day, but an entire month. And you're going to be closing it out with us if you'd like. So that's going to be June 30th, which is a Friday at 8 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time, just in case you're Hollywood folks over there. So yeah, we always have a great time. You know, Steve Cream, all the stupid stuff that's come out of it. Come see what random thing comes next. If you would like to be a part of it, not just watching, not just in the audience, if you would like to actually participate and play Quiplash with us, shoot us a DM as soon as you can, and we're going to try to lock you a spot down. It is going to be first come, first serve. So get to us quick.
Yeah, it's always been popular. So yeah, definitely if you want to do it, go ahead and sign up. And we'll start like a wait list or something.
Yeah, definitely. Well. We'll have a wait list, and if you're in the audience and someone doesn't show, we'll pull you in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I guess that leads right into our first rumors segment. Jonathan, what happened with the Universal blog over the weekend?
Oh boy, this was a fun surprise. And a lot of other people caught it before even I did, because I was at work, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of things popping up on Twitter and Discord and the Universal forums and Facebook going, Universal posted a blog post that has been taken down. And it's like, what's going on? And basically the blog post wasn't really filled out. It was just the title of a blog post, something sort of ready to go, but there was no actual content in the blog post itself. And what the title was I follow Oddfellow. That's all it was, just I follow Oddfellow. And I mean, that got a lot of people talking. Right now there's obviously a rumored Oddfellow house that we've talked about for a while. We've even discussed the possibility of Oddfellow potentially being an icon in the rumor sphere. And now with potentially unless this was a secret tease that Universal planned the whole time and it was all on purpose, if this is a blog post eventually meant to be put out for Oddfellow himself, I think it's safe to say that Oddfellow, his presence is probably going to be more than just a house. Like getting a whole blog post, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say this was not purposely done by
No.
Universal, seeing as it was
Hmm.
just the text "I follow Oddfellow," and it was up for about 5 minutes
I
before
was
they
gonna
got rid of it.
say, yeah, it was taken down very quickly from what I read.
Yeah, that's not a good way to tease a property that's coming in any way. So I think I'd
No.
say definitely an accident on their part. I think it definitely confirms that he's going to have some impact on this event, and
Yeah,
like you said, likely beyond just being in a house. Whether that's icon level or maybe there's a different experience or scare zone or whatever it may be, that he
yeah.
just has more than a little something,
De facto icon,
yeah,
something.
bone level, whatever
Yeah.
it may be. Um, but yeah, it's seeming like that's definitely going to happen. I don't know if I'd expect it to be the next announcement. Again, I would expect another IP before we even get to our original. So this feels like it might have come out just quite a bit too early. Like we might not know about it for a little bit still.
Have we ever had like adversarial icons where it's like Jack versus Oddfellow, or like Freddy versus
I mean,
Jason?
we've
Like,
never had like a full straight up in icons. I guess the closest you could say was like HHN 20. Kind of when you had
okay,
fear was
fear
almost like
kind of
I don't,
battling. Yeah,
it wasn't he wasn't battling them, but there was always the insinuation that they were kind of his puppets, but they weren't necessarily happy about it either. But no, there's never been a direct like verses of icons
yeah,
at all. So yeah, I look forward to seeing where they go with this because it does make it a little more exciting. That it's not just gonna be like there's an Oddfellow house. There
yeah,
is more to this, so
yeah.
I can't wait to see what that is.
Absolutely.
Another rumor, another original rumor that we've discussed in the past is starting to pick up a lot more traction. And not just that it's happening. We've always felt pretty confident about it, right? But we're talking about the Dragon's House, which has been on
Hmm.
spec maps. It was discussed before that. It's been discussed after that. Particularly how there is an unknown level of dueling dragons that will tie into this house. We didn't know if it would just kind of be Easter eggs, if it would be a straight dueling dragons house. Well, Steam has been picking up that it is a dueling dragons house. We are talking about the coaster that opened with Islands of Adventure, that was in Merlinwood, that actually has an extremely deep backstory and lore for a coaster, and I want this to be very true.
Yeah, it seems like a couple of news outlets have kind of picked this up in the kind of the rumor mill type of thing, and it's really starting to pick up
Yeah,
that it's dueling dragons.
yeah. So I think we're going forward until we get shot down by like an insider or something. We're probably going to start referring to this not just as dragons with a potential dueling dragons tie-in, but as a rumored dueling dragons house, and that's pretty
Which,
exciting for me because I'd be excited for a dragons house. I don't know about you guys, regardless, but dueling dragons
mhm.
takes that hype up just another notch for me.
Yeah,
Tying it into like universal lore, Islands of Adventure lore, and being able to help an attraction that is gone sort of live on in some way through a Horror Nights house. I think it's just so exciting and such a unique idea of taking an original attraction and giving it more life, breathing more life into it. I think that's really fun and exciting and definitely gives more layers to a, like you said, like a general dragon house would be cool, but giving it the layers of that universal history and lore and adding that into a dragon's house, I mean, would just make it so much more exciting.
And great thing is that as theme park fans, specifically like Universal and Disney, we are used to uh, extinct attractions only being given to us as a way for them to make money on merch.
yeah,
This would actually be something we could experience with an old attraction that we loved. So that's very exciting.
yeah. This
Mhm.
is really exciting to get this, and that really opens if this was a hit. Think about some of the others that we could potentially get. Maybe 10 years down the line, we get a Poseidon's Fury
Yeah,
house.
right. Hey, I'm wearing the shirt right now. Give it to me.
All right, moving on to our Hollywood construction update. It looks like The Last of Us facade is starting to really just kind of look like the entrance of the Pittsburgh QZ, which ties into basically what we're about to talk.
Yeah.
So, if you don't know what the Pittsburgh QZ means, you will know by the end of this show,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
is why we're
Yeah.
doing it.
And this isn't really fully. It's speculation, so they haven't confirmed exactly what it is, but they have told us that this fully takes place in Pittsburgh,
Right.
and that fact that's looking like the entrance of the QZ for Pittsburgh. I think that's the facade pretty safely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I want to thank once again Kevin for helping us. He goes in the tram and takes pictures and everything of getting a good picture of this facade for the Mummy Q. But like if you put two and two together, which I have done in like group chats, like here's this picture and here's the Pittsburgh QZ, you can see exactly how they're gonna do it. Like there's even a booth on the right of the Pittsburgh QZ in the game that you can just see like built or like getting this has the structure is being built for the facade itself. So I don't think there's any doubt that that's what it is. And I think that's a very fun way to start off the house. I think it could be pretty nice scenically, and it's a good way to sort of, I don't know, like let people know, like if you don't have any familiarity with the game, that hey, this is a quarantine zone. You probably are starting to get an idea of what's going wrong, in this universe, in this world you're about to step in.
And that's not the only advancements we've seen on construction in Hollywood, as those who have ridden the tram tour have gotten a peek into Soundstage 15. Jonathan, what are they seeing in there?
Oh yes. So right now, the Soundstage 15 has been open for a bit. It seems like they're doing really heavy construction in there now. And right now, there's a lot of wood and a lot of just sort of house layouts being built that you can see from the tram tour. However, there's a specific house layout that a lot of people on various discords and Twitters and Inside Universal have sort of pointed at and said, "Hey, this kind of looks like something from a rumored IP, being Stranger Things." And it's a circular section that has on the top of it almost has like area for fencing. And people have pointed out that this looks like not exactly. Obviously, we're seeing it from a very weird perspective, and when you're in it, it could be completely different. But people have been comparing it to the Russian prison from Stranger Things 4, and looking at them back to back, I really do see how they can see that and picture that from this structure here. Obviously it could mean something different, but if Stranger Things is currently rumored for Hollywood and Orlando, it would make sense for Hollywood for Stranger Things, like it has every year, to be given the soundstage spot. So I think it makes sense.
Yeah, this is another one of those cases where I don't want to shoot it down at all because I always seem to be wrong when it's like, like it, but who knows? And then it's always ends up being it. So yeah, it's it. Sure, why not? Let's go with that.
Exactly. This is the one time it's not going to be it. You're going
Yeah,
to
I
be
know, right?
wrong.
Oh, damn, I should have shot it down. Fuck.
Alrighty,
Um,
Jonathan, you are a resident John Murdy correspondent. What crazy stuff has John Murdy been up to on Twitter over the last week?
let's talk about it. For people who don't know, just give it a little brief reminder. John Murdy is the creative director of Hollywood, and on Twitter he talks a lot about Hollywood's HHN event and some thoughts, some things that might be coming, and sometimes he just says things that are funny. But we have a couple of things we're going to talk about today. The first one was just a general tweet. It wasn't in response to anything. Basically, he just said, working on something today. It's not a house, not a scare zone, not the terror tram, not a show, not an RIP experience, just something. These somethings come up from time to time. And I'm going to be completely honest. This intrigues me so much, but I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, I definitely don't know what it is. Uh, and I can't tell if it. We always talk about this, how John Murdy is very like two different people on Twitter, where sometimes he's just so transparent and he tells you things directly, or he is telling you something while not fully telling you. And there are times he just says stuff that means absolutely
Absolutely
nothing
nothing. He's just playing
at all.
games. Yeah, sometimes.
He will try to tell you everything at points, and I don't know if it's that or the times where he's just like, yeah, no, this literally means nothing.
Yeah, yeah. He could have
Yeah.
been working on his like daughter's homework.
Yeah.
And he could have been like, "I'm working on something today." Like, who knows?
they're like, this is harder than the RAP experience writing that all out. But but yeah, who knows? But hopefully it's it's something something interesting. It's
Well,
something related to HHN.
hopefully, at least John Murdy knows.
Yeah, that would be important, right?
But I question that sometimes. So
Maybe it's the
um,
show. We talked about a
yeah.
new show. There's a new show rumored. Maybe that's what it.
Well, he says
No, he
not a
said
show.
not a show.
Not a show.
So what does
so that
that leave?
Guest flow,
he's making
An
another.
ad?
He's
food and
Maybe.
beverage.
Maybe it's like some sort of ad drop
Yeah, maybe.
or like media thing.
I don't know.
hopefully he's just making like another crow. Like that crow that appeared in last year. Like there was just a crow walking around with a big
No.
top hat,
Yeah.
and like I want to see something like that again this year. That it really has nothing to do with the event itself, but it's just kind of cool and it just walks around sometimes.
I did love it. Made no sense, but I loved it.
That would qualify as a something technically.
It surely was something. All right. I believe he also had some stuff to say about The Last of Us as well, right?
Mm-hmm. I'll take this because this I think is really interesting. I compiled this from responses because he responded to a lot of people about the same thing. But basically he said that the Last of Us house, which we talked about last week, being inspired by the Twitter post from one of the creators of The Last of Us. Basically that The Last of Us was always going to be based was never going to be based off the show from day one. It was always the game, which is kind of crazy. And he also clarified that this decision to base it off the game was decided before the TV show. I only assume that like before the TV show came out,
Which
and
does line up with what Neil Druckmann said about him reaching out to basically make this happen in December of 2021.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure HHN went, this lines up perfectly with the show, though. So, yes, let's do it.
Oh, absolutely. But they saw the opportunity and it worked out. But yeah, remember there were a lot of rumors, particularly last year, of saying like it was going to be based off the show, but then the show got delayed, so then the house got delayed, and this and that. It as long as like if John Murray's really being transparent here and not just sort of covering up things, that means all that kind of didn't happen. It might have always been based off the game, and they just thought to delay it because the show got delayed or something like that. Maybe there wasn't a whole like a big drama behind it. Like it's interesting to think about now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it seems pretty straightforward, right? Like,
No, like
they go ahead.
no, like if the problem, like the reason they delayed it was because of the TV. Remember the rumor was
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I think it was pretty
yeah.
straightforward. That probably was still because of the show, because you still want to line it up and give this the biggest boom on a pop culture level that you can. You want it to be as relevant as possible, and with the TV show coming out, that helps the relevancy of even the video game as a property.
But what about Evil Dead Rise? Because the rumor was that Warner Brothers said, "Hey, we're sorry about The Last of Us. So in return, you get you will give you Evil Dead Rise," and that related to that ended up getting everyone's favorite Hellblock horror. So even if they weren't working on the show and it wasn't going to be based on the Warner on the show at all, do you think that has any merit? Like just because the show got delayed, Warner Brothers like here's Evil Dead Rise, or was Evil Dead Rise always in the plans and it wasn't like given as a we're sorry about the show getting delayed?
I mean, I'd say it definitely wasn't a we're sorry situation.
Right? No.
It could have been still related in the sense where like that was okay, backup IP, here we go. Let's grab Evil Dead Rise, and then basically the same thing happened. That's a possibility, but does it make you think maybe they were both just going to be there a little bit more now?
That's what I'm thinking. Like that's the thought I'm trying to get across. Like they were both sort of kind of just planned, you know, and then something went wrong with with Last of Us obviously, but also with particularly with Evil Dead Rise.
Hmm.
Like that was the big problem. You know, not necessarily crazy chain of events that was rumored before.
Yeah. I don't know if that chain of events is true. I do see that it could have potentially been like not necessarily that it was ever going to be based on the house at all, and I believe John Murray would that it was saying, or the show at all. But maybe it was kind of like Warner Brothers had to step in and pull rank and be like, "We don't want you to use this property until we use it." But we also don't want to burn our bridges with HHN, so we're going to offer up
Yeah.
Evil Dead Rise. So let's start negotiating Evil Dead Rise. Like we have to pull
Mm.
rank here, but we're going to take away Naughty Dog's The Last of Us from you because we get to use it first. But therefore, because there was probably something in their contract
Maybe.
with Naughty
Yeah.
Dog saying that you can't give it
They have
to
like exclusivity of
exclusive
using the property for a certain
for
amount
a
of
certain
time.
amount of time unless Warner Brothers says yes, and they weren't going to say yes to allowing HHNU to use it before they got to release
That is
their
possible. That is
So-
very possible.
So it could have been some sort of negotiation there, but then to kind of not completely burn bridges with HHN forever, they did offer up Evil Dead Rise. That's how the rumor could potentially be true in my head.
Aren't IP
Still
rights
makes sense.
weird? It's fun to look behind the scenes and figure out how all this stuff went down. Because I'm sure even how we're simplifying it now, you know, in some way, I'm sure behind the scenes it's 100% more complicated.
Oh, I mean, yeah. We
Oh,
make
yeah.
this seem so black and white.
Oh yeah, it's all fan fiction. It's all.
It's so much more detailed. It goes through so many teams and people that it's never going to be as straightforward as we make it sound.
Oh, of course not. No.
And it looks like everything else we have John Murdy wise is probably just a little rapid fire section if you just want to knock those out really fast.
Yeah, I can just do that now, and they're super quick. The first one is what we all expected. There will be a Scaramony. Next one, the Soundstage 15 will be an IP, so that leans into the Stranger
Shocker.
Things theory a little bit more, right?
Who would have thought Hollywood you'd use the soundstage on an IP? Not me.
Crazy, right? Insane. Next one was a question someone asked that I thought was fun. Someone said, "Hey, what are the odds of us getting a Jurassic Park house?" And John Murdy replied, "I ask every year."
So do
Now,
I.
does he actually? Yeah, I mean, so maybe he wants to do. So it seems like he wants to do it. It's just I'm pretty sure most people do want to do it. It's just kind of hard in many ways, getting the rights and everything. But moving on from that one, we got two more fun ones. One is that there will be a fire tower this year, which Agent Hollywood's sort of famous for. They have that tower that just shoots fire out, which is quite fun. And the last one is that he inspired some of the food for this year's HHN, which I don't know what that means, but that's exciting, kind of. It's interesting, at least.
Yeah, interesting.
Is it
Great.
going to be like a lot of Irish food? Like, I don't know.
They will have Lucky Charms at the event this week.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness. I was worried they wouldn't have those.
And I think that's it for John Murdy this week, right?
Yeah, that's about it for John Murdy. And now we actually have some news that's not regarding Halloween Horror Nights.
Yep. Sure. Let's just hop right into Howl-O-Scream Orlando first. Surprisingly, there is more than one Howl-O-Scream to talk about in this week's episode for us.
Yeah, so we got a lot of announcements for some returning things. So I'm going to kind of rapid fire some returning. So Siren's Last Call, returning. Tormented, returning. Poison Grotto, returning. Longhornsman Tavern, returning. New, Can You Keep a Secret? Time will reveal the details. How was this leaked to us?
This was an announcement on Twitter. So they had a little video of their pirates, sort of showing you drinks and talking about the bars and just sort of making puns. And it said all these bars, the Siren's Last Call, Tormented, Poison Grotto, like everything you said, will be returning, and there will be one extra bar that has not been revealed yet. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so all these are bars. So I'm
Which,
not sure.
let's be honest, the most important aspect of Hollow Scream Orlando is the themed bars.
So we're getting brand new themed bar. That's great.
I never got to try any of them yet, so I'm excited to try some of them this year.
Oh, that's right. It's finally time, Jonathan.
Yeah.
And then we're hop down just I-4 and go to Hallow Scream Busch Gardens, Tampa, where they did announce a new scare zone, which I'm kind of excited about. It is Sin City Zombies. The photo that they used was of a scare actor who was a zombie Elvis. So,
That sounds fun.
you can picture that.
Yeah.
Really quick, the description for this is: on the outskirts of the Vegas Strip lies a small town that is home to some of the best entertainers to ever live, along with zombies who run rampant. You better hope your number wins, because this is one town you don't want to lose in.
Yeah,
This
I don't make it down to Busch Gardens, Tampa too much, but this sounds fun. I might have to make it just for this scare zone alone.
I know, right? Like,
Yeah,
just
I'm,
pop in, see it, I'm like, all right, bye, I'm done.
I'm a big Vegas guy. I feel like it's kind of like Orlando for adults. It's
Yeah,
kind of, it's
basically.
like it's like sleazy Orlando.
More
yeah,
sleazy Orlando.
yeah, like way more sleazy. Yeah, Orlando. But yeah, so they kind of go hand in hand, and I'm a big Vegas guy, so I have to make it down there.
it's super exciting because I've never been to Hollow Scream and Busch Gardens, but I know one of the things people talk about regarding that event is that their scare zones are top notch. Like even some people will say like Busch Gardens scare zones will beat HHN's, like blow them out of the water like every year, at least with a couple of them, just because how they approach their scare zones. So if I do make it out to Busch Gardens this year and get to finally check out Hollow Scream, this is a scare zone I'm definitely going to be interested in.
I feel like the way you just described that, you'd probably be a little let down. I think the
Oh
big thing is they are
no.
just a lot, like they really focus on being scare zones.
Okay.
So they make them a hell of a lot scarier than we do here in Halloween Horror Nights Orlando.
In regards to like sets and story esque, like
I would say
how
the
would you
sets are
compare?
not better typically, no.
So are we thinking sort of like Hollywood zones in a sense, where I thought Hollywood zones were really scary,
Mm.
but were kind of
No, they are
nothing.
better than Hollywood, I think. I will say
Okay.
that. The sets
All right.
tend to
Well,
be better than Hollywood.
I'm still interested then. I like getting scared,
It's a nice
especially.
mix of good enough sets and really intense scares.
That sounds great,
So, yeah.
and this sounds like a fun concept,
I
a
look
really
forward
silly
to
concept.
you getting fucked up in them.
All right,
Uh,
I think that's all the news and rumors, and I think we're on to our main segment, which again is going to be just kind of a brief overview of the backstory, main characters, factions, infected levels, and kind of what's going on with the tiny little section of plot of Pittsburgh, which has been kind of been told to us as where the house is going
Yeah.
to be set.
So basically, we won't spoil anything beyond that, which is early enough in the game, So, like, the end of the game will not be spoiled or anything like that if you stick around for this. And even the spoilers will be very light for the
Yeah.
Pittsburgh section.
And we're not going to really talk too much about before or after Pittsburgh as well. So we're not going to spoil any deaths before Pittsburgh or anything. We're mainly just going to kind of focus on what we think if you're not really going to play the game, what you need to know in our discussions moving forward on the podcast, so you're not completely left in the dark.
Just the very basics of the game itself.
Yeah.
And then some touching on Pittsburgh section as well.
Yeah, some terminology and some plot stuff, because I know when we get Jess gets back, when she gets caught up, we're definitely going to try to speculate what we're going to see in this house, and we want everyone to kind of be on the same page. One of our listeners who was at Spooky Empire definitely kind of told us that we sometimes talk as if everyone already knows all what we're talking about, and that we need to kind of fill people in a little bit more. And I think that was a really great feedback. And so I think that's what we're trying to do here, which we
want to provide context of the things we'll be talking about moving forward. Really, exactly, is kind of the main thing.
And every time we talk about it, we can say, if you don't know what we're talking about, go back to our episode where we do. So, so, all right. So let's hop right into it. I think the first thing that you need to know, but I think we do need to put a little bit of a spoiler warning. So if you're trying to stay completely spoiler free, there's no way to not spoil at least a little bit. Yeah. So if you want to be completely spoiler free and you don't want to know anything about The Last of Us, I guess now is the time to turn off the show. Maybe come back for the voicemails. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so for the next, it's again, we're not going to spoil anything too major, but we are going to be talking about certain things. Yeah. And I think we're going to be at least talking about at least one major death.
I would say it spoils about 5% of the entire game.
Yeah.
And maybe about 15 to 20% of what you would see in the house itself.
Right. And we are going to talk about one major kind of shocking moment of it. It's because it's a thing that happens in Pittsburgh. So, yeah.
So, first thing, if you ever see TLOU, it's The Last of Us. That's what they mean.
Yeah.
There's number one. You're informed. You're welcome. But seriously,
there we go.
It's over. He championed this segment. Here we go.
All right. So the first thing I think you need to know is a little bit, just basically the backstory of. The main kind of backstory is in 2013, there is kind of an outbreak of mutant cordyceps, which is a type of fungus that kind of mutates, and it was able to normally didn't be able to affect people. I think it affects other animals, and ants especially. I think is the main one that currently in real life it kind of affects ants, and it will literally take control of an ant's mind to make it move to a place where it can grow, and so it will in a better position for it to then grow in real life.
And would actually have it, like you said, control its brain and actually have it move, so it would almost appear like a zombie.
Yeah, it literally controls it like a zombie, like ant, that where makes it do something that would be totally against its own survival and its only survival for the fungus. Mm-hmm. So over time, in the story, that over time it learns how to affect humans, and in the backstory, it's a very quick. Quick infection, and it basically ravages the United States over. It goes from 0 to 60 in a few months.
Yep.
And then by 6 months, it has basically completely changed the landscape of the world. And so, 20 years later, so we basically we get a little bit of that in the game. Where it just kind of sets up the outbreak, and then it flash forwards to 20 years later, where basically the civilization has been decimated by this infections, and its survivors live in these totalitarian quarantine zones controlled by Fedra, which we'll talk about in a second what Fedra is, and other little towns and segments and nomadic traveling groups that kind of live in these deserted buildings where they just basically kind of fight for survival.
Yeah, basically.
And the other thing I think is I think that's mainly what they need to know until we jump forward to Pittsburgh when it comes to
the base of the story.
Yeah.
Yes, this is it.
So the other things you need to know is you kind of need to know the two main characters of the story. And there are two people that you're going to be following throughout the house, and we've already been told that these are the two people that we're going to be following, and that is Joel and Ellie. So Joel is a smuggler that lives in a Boston QZ, and we'll kind of talk about what QZs are in a little bit when we get to the Fedra. But it's basically a quarantine zone that is controlled by Fedra, and really they don't control what comes in and out. And he's a paid smuggler who kind of gets paid to bring things in and out of this lockdown quarantine zone, and he is paid to smuggle a teenager from a group of freedom fighters that we'll talk a little bit about more later, called the Fireflies, to take her out of the quarantine zone to their camp a little bit further away in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and a quick thing about Joel, you might need to understand about him, and he is a very independent, puts on the facade of don't care about anything or anyone, uh, don't want to be here, just want to survive kind of deal.
Yeah, he's kind of really just in it for the money. He, um, without going into it, he just kind of um, feels obligated to follow through, even if once it wasn't about money anymore. He just feels obligated to follow through because he slowly starts to bond with Ellie. So Ellie is the other main character. So, like I said, she's a teenager who is important to these Fireflies because they seem to think that she is maybe the cure to the infection.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically, not going too far into her backstory, but she has been infected by this, but has not turned yet into mind
Yes,
control.
she does not see any effects.
She does not see any sort of a level of infection that it normally goes, which we're gonna, I think, spend most of this segment talking about kind of the levels of infection and how quickly you get infected and stuff like that. I think that's where we're going to spend a lot of time. But she has not seen. Was affected 3 weeks ago, and she has not seen really any changes.
Yeah, and I think her personality is pretty important to understand as well, which you'll probably see a lot of in the show. Very independent, basically a little shithead, loves to talk shit.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be some really great quips from her throughout the house, and there definitely was in the game. So
yeah.
I think you'll enjoy that.
Jonathan, do you have anything to add about the backstory, Joel and Ellie, before we kind of move on to talk about the factions?
Well, jumping off on just the characters themselves, Joel and Ellie, I think that that difference that we talked about, Joel is very, just on his own, sort of just wanting to get a task done, not really open to connection. And Ellie is more of the person who quips and tries to be sort of a little bit more outgoing in some ways and make conversation. It makes very, very interesting dynamic, of these two different personalities sort of clashing with each other, both having one mission to get to, point A to point B. And it makes the actual journey of which a lot of people do consider, like a simple journey of point A to point B with some stuff happening in between, a lot more interesting. I'd say the dialogue and the character development uh, is probably the most interesting part of this game, and will likely be, I mean, I hope will be a really interesting part of the house as well, with how they tackle the voice lines and how their characters are going to be implemented.
Yeah, no, I agree. Massive part of the story, and I sure hope it shows up in the house how important the characters themselves are. I know that can be tough in the house, but I hope they pull it off right.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's move on to the factions. So these are kind of groups of people or organizations that may hear us refer to, or maybe refer to the house. They might not be featured in the house, or they might be, but you definitely could see allusions to these in the house. And when we're talking and discussing about what we could potentially see, we will probably refer to these groups, so which is why we need to talk about them. So the main group that there's the first one I want to talk about is Fedra. So Fedra is essentially a group that originally was very similar to kind of thing like FEMA.
Mhm.
Like it was just an organization inside the United States government that was just tasked to kind of responding to disasters and emergencies, very similar to how FEMA works now. But during this outbreak, basically the leaders of FEMA had basically seized control of the government and armed forces and basically took over the government and very quickly started to set up quarantine zones that basically started imposing martial law and basically dissolved any other organizations of state government. It was just
Mhm.
Fedra basically controlling it all. And in these zones, soldiers basically started preventing people from leaving in and out, started basically forcing them to work forced labor and doing whatever jobs they wanted. And when supplies were low, they basically started rationing food. So it basically kind of became martial law, and it stayed like that for forever,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. To put it very simply, throughout this story, Fedra is the government.
Yes,
Simply put,
Hmm.
they do it all, they run it all. It is
right.
their government. Done.
Yeah. So basically, it started off as just like a, the
Just an
temporary thing,
agency that
an
that
temporary
took
agent
care of
thing, and then
disasters
the
and
disasters, and then it stuck forever.
yeah.
And then they yeah, often like executed criminals and if expelled people from the QZ. So they basically controlled, you know, the government. They
Yeah,
controlled everything.
it's a very common story of maybe they think they were doing what's best for the larger population, but doing very cutthroat things and terrible things to make that happen.
Right.
Hmm.
You want to play through and argue whether it was for their best interest or the population's best interest, you can decide. I think you'll go a specific way on that, but just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for whenever there's kind of a strong faction like that, this is kind of the antagonistic faction to that, at least at where we are in the story, is the Fireflies. So they are kind of a revolutionary militia group, and there is a multiple of them in the story, but this is kind of the main one that matters in the timeline that we are in for this house. And they are revolting against Fedra's rule and numerous quarantine zones across the United States. And their ultimate goal is basically to restore all branches of American government and democracy. So their goal is basically bring back democracy, but they're doing so basically by doing revolutionary militia type things. And then their other main goal is they're trying to find a cure for the infection, because Fedra has really stopped trying to do that. They
Yes,
do not really
they've
care.
accepted this as
They've
life moving
accepted,
forward.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so there are not people researching to do it unless it's Fedra doctors.
Mhm.
So they have kind of taken on we're going to try to find a cure because Fedra is not doing so. And yeah, anything you guys want to add from Fireflies and Fedra before we move on to the kind of last faction that we might
Yeah. The
encounter?
only thing I'd add is potentially important, something we might see in the house is um, are either of them good or either of them bad? Are both good or both bad? It definitely tries to make you question that in the actions they make. There are certain scenes and things they do that try to sway you one way rather than the other, but it is a very important part of the game, and I assume some of that might reflect in the house as well.
Yeah. And the last group of faction is basically when we get to Pittsburgh, we're going to encounter a group of like organized hunters or like rogue militia things that are not Fireflies, and they are not Fedra. They're basically just like a rogue of citizens that have taken back Pittsburgh from Fedra and the Fireflies
Mhm.
at previous timelines, and they now control Pittsburgh. And they're probably going to be in if we're instead in Pittsburgh and only in Pittsburgh, they're most likely going to be the non-infected antagonists that you're going to encounter in the house.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
because in the game you probably saw more of the Pittsburgh Hunters than you saw infected throughout Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think even in the either it was a press release or it was something they talked about the house itself. They said out of they listed the antagonists. They said, oh, the infected, which we'll get to in more detail later, and they also said hunters. They made sure to let everyone know that hunters will be a part of the house, and I assume because like we said of how prominent they were, they are going to be they are going to be a big part of the house because of just how important they are to the Pittsburgh area in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And in the show, you get some really developed characters of these, um, but in the game, you don't necessarily get that. So we're not going to go in when we're talking about the main characters. We're not going to talk about some of the characters from the
Yeah.
show of the leaders of this group or anything, because those are um, basically were created for the show.
And I would say, because we have said in the past how similar the game and the show are, and if you watch the show, you're really going to get it. This is kind of one of those main differences where the show just kind of said, we're going to dive into these hunters and give them real personalities and characters. Uh, where if that's what you've watched, you're not going to get that in this house, because in the game, they do not. So one of those things where maybe if you're expecting one thing from the show, this house will not give it to you.
Yeah, Pittsburgh is definitely one of those locations of the show where and versus the game where it gets fleshed out way more in the show. So it's interesting that they're going to set this house, base it on the game. It kind of allows them to flesh out some of the things maybe a little bit differently
Yeah.
than they did in the show. Because if they're going to base it on the game, they could take some liberties, things that are a little bit different than the show did, because the show takes some liberties already. So we could see some fairly big differences potentially, just because there already is some from
And
the show versus
I
game.
feel like there may have been some intention behind that. I don't know if I believe that, but because every other instance, for the most part, the game has more development of characters than the show in certain areas. This is the one time where the game just kind of didn't.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I think this is a perfect time. It's different than what I have on the outline here, but I think this is a perfect time to just kind of hop right into the Pittsburgh plot, and then we'll go back to
Yeah,
the levels infected. So basically, what you get in the game is that Joel and Ellie have acquired a truck, and they are driving through Pittsburgh, and they are ambushed by these hunters, and their car is wrecked, and then they run into two brothers who are named Henry and Sam, who are not in the hunters, and in fact they are kind of on the run from these hunters
Yep.
as well. And they kind of escape the city together, and are hiding out from this group, and that's the main thing that you're getting out of Pittsburgh from the game.
Yep. And then, are you going to go into that next part right now?
Yeah, we might as well.
Because if you are, this is the one big spoiler.
We might as
moment.
well, because I think we're not going to go too much, but I think we want to talk about some of the things like scenes that we might encounter, some big major moments that we might encounter in the house, and I think we have to talk about it. So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So they escape the city, but Sam, who is one of the brothers, is infected and bitten, and he hides it from the group, and he doesn't tell anyone. And as this infection takes hold, he does attack Ellie, but Henry, his brother, shoots him before he can kill Ellie, and then he is so distraught with what he has done, he kills himself.
Yes. Extremely sad moment in the game. Probably top two, top
even
three
worse than the show
at least.
Yeah.
And the show absolutely wrecks you.
Yeah.
Which, for some reason, we have not brought this up yet. In the show, Pittsburgh is not Pittsburgh. It takes place in Kansas City. So if you have watched the show and you want to translate what you saw in the show, it's Kansas City.
Yes,
In the
I forgot
game,
that.
it is Pittsburgh. Everything else is the same, and what takes place in it for the most part, the cities just change.
Right. And Fedra did used to. This used to be a quarantine zone for Fedra, but it is not. It's controlled by these hunters, and I believe this used to be kind of a Firefly holdout as well. But these hunters have kicked them out as well. So this is purely controlled by these hunter groups. But you probably will see some cult throwbacks to Fedra and Firefly because they were
Has been held by both.
Held by both previously when Joel and Ellie get there.
Yes. So I think the setup for a lot of fun Easter eggs throughout the house. There's a good chance there that you can pick up on a lot. Hopefully, we get to do Unmasking the Horror in this house and really get to see them.
Definitely.
Oh yeah.
All right. Anything we want to talk about the Pittsburgh plot? Is there any like scenes or things that stand out that we want to talk about before we kind of start talking about the different infected that we're going to encounter while we're in Pittsburgh?
I think there are a lot of locations in Pittsburgh that obviously, when you have a haunted house, the locations are going to be one of the most important parts. And they go through a lot of places. They go through like a hotel. They go through they go through lots of buildings. But I think the most important location for the house, if you're sticking it just in Pittsburgh, are the sewers. I think the sewers will make for probably the scariest scenes, because the sewers are completely filled with infected. We'll go into what types, but they're filled with all types of infected. They are literally everywhere. Like they've just been living here, and there's tons. There's absolute tons. There's even a point in the game where you get to almost exit, and there's so many that like you can't actually defeat them all. You have to you have to get out because there's too many. So this section is the part I'm probably the most excited for the house, if they can really translate that feeling of you are trapped from all angles. And you got to find some way to get out of there, which works great for a haunted house environment, because these creatures and infected are not going to stop, and they're just going to be more and more and more and more. I think that's a playing the game. I've just recently completed it, and completed the Pittsburgh section and the entire game. That probably was the most impactful for me in terms of scares. So I think in the house it's just going to translate beautifully.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there have been a lot of comments of this game wasn't scary, the show wasn't scary, whatever rendition of this property they've experienced wasn't scary. I don't know if I agree with that, but some people have that take. However, if you give HHN the ability to put you in this dark, disgusting, dripping sewer with a bunch of infected coming out of these dark corners, I'm pretty sure they can make that scary regardless of how you felt about the game or the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, are we ready to move on to the different infected types that you may encounter in the HHN house?
Let's do it.
All right, so we're gonna take. There's basically four main ones I'm gonna go over, and the best thing to know is these are kind of like the different levels of infected. So this is basically you start off as one, and over the course of several years, your body will potentially turn into any of these, and ending in others. So it's you basically, this is how far the infection has ravished your body. Is the main thing. So you start off as one, and then you basically, once the infection has completely taken hold, you could potentially end up in the last level. And there are more levels than this, but these are the four that you were encountered in the first game, and then there are a few others that you were encountered in the second game. But I don't think we're going to go over those because the second game is so fresh and new that I think it would be pretty spoilery.
There's no reason.
And I highly doubt that we'll encounter these in the house. I mean, maybe if someone is creative and they wanted to throw it in, but probably not. We'll probably just get these four because that is what we encounter in the first game. These for levels of infected.
Yep, makes sense.
So the first level is called the runner. And they all have nicknames. So based on uh, kind of how they interact with the non-infected. So the runners are people who are recently just recently turned. So they were bitten. I think within the last couple of days, because you don't turn immediately, but once you start showing signs, then you basically almost immediately start becoming a runner. And they are defined by their intense speed, sluggish attacks, and a tendency to kind of hoard up with other runners and just run at or just be giant hordes of them. Think like 28 days later type zombie, like the
Very,
fast
yeah.
zombie, like just rush at you type of zombie. They're not your
It
slow
finds its prey and it is just gonna go at it
yeah.
with everything it can.
And
That's it.
it's just
That's
kind
all.
of like a craziness, like. And I think one of the main things is that with runners is that you can kind of see humanity behind the eyes still of the person trying to fight this infection, but you can't. So that, like, it's basically like almost really sad sometimes in the story of movie when you see someone turn into a runner, because you can see that it's taking over someone's life, and then they're almost trying to fight it back,
Mm-hmm.
right? So but they're just basically crazed, and they're just gonna rush at you and just try to
Yep.
just
There's really no
yeah,
strategy behind their
strategy.
attack. It's just come at you.
Yeah, and they come at you and to basically spread this infection.
Can I
And
hop
so, and
into?
you are so that is from like um I would say what it's from like recently infected to about 2 weeks, I would say. And
Mhm.
that's kind of where the runner thing. So after about 2 weeks, then you move into a phase called the stalker. And the stalker are kind of like, per their name, they kind of like stalk and hide in the dark and attack at opportune moments. They sometimes latch onto walls and allow the cordyceps to fester, keeping their host alive until the prey walks by. And at that point, it breaks free from the cordyceps and kind of attacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, they have a little boo hole, you could say,
Yeah,
and
basically.
very natural for HHN, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is where you start to see they are not just aimlessly attacking you. There's some strategy behind it.
Yeah, they're
It's
hiding
more
basically.
of a hunt at this point rather than just
Yeah.
aimlessly chasing.
Yeah, and they're in this from like 2 weeks till about their first year. This is the kind of that stage
Hmm.
they're in. Jonathan, do you have anything to add from the first two stages that I've covered?
I do want to say just for a second, because you were talking about like runners, how once they get infected, there's like talk about like, oh, you're seeing this, this infection go in their body and go into this once living person's head, and like one of the big sort of themes from the shows, and I guess in most shows and uh, things that involve sort of zombie like viruses or whatever, is that like when you get infected and it starts controlling over you, are you still in there? Like, is this person that who is killing and becoming a monster? Are they just sort of in there with the cordyceps sort of controlling you, and you're forced to watch all of it? I think that's one of the most interesting and psychologically terrifying parts of this story, of the game story. Less so scares in the house, boo-hoo-ah, but just like thinking about these once humans who have now turned into like these terrifying monsters, and if they are still in there and forced to sort of watch as everything goes down. I find that quite interesting.
All right, should we move on to the third stage?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this is the one that you've probably heard of already. This is the most famous one, and that is the clickers.
Mm-hmm.
Clickers are people who have been infected for at least 1 year. the long time elapsed has allowed the fungus to basically spread all over their bodies by blinding them so they cannot see, and they have to use echolocation to find their prey. So they only rely on sound. However, the fungus has granted them an enhanced strength, making them really strong in close combat. So they're basically, those are the ones where you kind of see the fungus has spread all over their body, have made really crazy designs on their hands and face and legs and basically their entire body, and they have to just rely on sound.
Yep. These are, I think, the most iconic of the
Hmm.
infected from this property. They're the ones you see advertised visually. You're the ones you might have heard, like the sounds they made. Uh, they're called clickers for a reason. They make this clicking noise. You may have heard the sounds they make. These are kind of the headline infected.
Yeah, and these are the most traditional zombie like of all of them too, because they do kind of stumble around, kind of like if they hear a noise, they will stumble towards it.
Hmm.
So these are the most traditional zombies of where like the runners were kind of like 28 days later zombies just like running at you fast, and stalkers were kind of just like these little hidden like, in the walls, and you don't know they're necessarily one, and then they pop out. These are kind of your traditional. You see them kind of wandering in the game, wandering around, and you have to stealthily get past them.
Hmm.
So you're more of your traditional zombie-like opponent in a survival horror game.
Definitely. And I think going back to the sounds they make, I think that's going to have a huge effect on this house and its sound design. I think they're going to play a big part in that aspect of what we will experience in a couple months.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. And in the game too, I think these are the characters that are the most like you said, you have to stealth around them and everything. Like in that aspect, they're the most like horror, characters, zombie like characters, um, from a traditional sense. But they also give the most, at least in my opinion, playing the most jump scares because these things have enhanced traits. So unless you have like a special weapon, if they get close to you, you're dead. It's just that's it. Like if they grab you, there's no real saving yourself. It's kind of instant death. And these things, because they aren't as big as the big ones, but they're also like there's a sea of runners, and you can't really tell exactly who's next to you. These clickers can run from behind you, and without you even noticing it, just there's a jump scare of it just instantly killing you, because you happen to be looking the wrong way as it was coming from behind. So I do think that the actual triggers and the actual boo hole scares will work great for the clickers because in the game that's kind of what they do already. They're built for jump scares. So I think they will work beautifully in a house. In addition to the very cool sound design, they're definitely gonna have.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they are also the ones we will see the coolest. As you mentioned, they have some crazy designs. I think from a makeup standpoint, they are going to be the most impressive that we will see in this house. I cannot wait to see what they come up with.
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of the most iconic pop culture of them too. So I think we're gonna see probably for every stalker runner, we're gonna see 5 or 6 clickers. We're gonna see probably a lot more clickers than any other of
Yeah,
these infected types.
for lack of a better term, they are the mascot of The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And the last level is the bloater. So bloaters have been infected for several years. So like, years and years. They're the oldest ones that have basically have not been killed. And once you reach to a certain level, that the fungus has basically um, gotten so big on their body that has basically caused them to be really, really slow, but have almost like an armor like strength that has just gr- grown almost like armor plating on their body,
Hmm.
the one of the main parts of the game is that the bloaters can actually like tear pieces of that fungus off their body and almost like throw it like a grenade,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Which are the spores of the fungus, which can then infect the enemy they are throwing them at.
Yeah. So,
Uh, Again, this is one of those big differences from the game to the show.
Jonathan, do you have anything to add with bloaters?
Yeah, recently playing the game and seeing these creatures in action, I think they'll have a very cool presence. In If you guys didn't listen to last episode, John Murdy kind of like implied that bloaters would be in the Hollywood version of Last of Us, the house. So I would also assume Orlando would probably have them as well. And I don't even know why they wouldn't, because it's a very important part of the game. But yeah, like seeing these creatures in action is going to be so cool. They're so big, they're so intimidating. They look really cool. They move in a very weird way, slow, sluggish, but also really powerful, which is fun. And also, their skin, or their not even their fungus at this point, like their body has these lighter parts on them that are like sort of not glowing, but they're a lot brighter than the rest of them. And in the game, like that's the video games are that's the weak spot. You got to aim for that. If they could make that effect like look really well in a house, almost like have parts of the body glowing as well, in addition to the all the other cool prosthetics and costume they can have for this creature. um I really think it's gonna look phenomenal and be phenomenal in the house. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is like near the end of the house, or like near the finale, to really be like, all right, we showed you all these other types of creatures. Now here's the big guns. Here is the big bloater that you have to encounter. That would be really really fun.
And I do fully expect us to get kind of the glowing spores on them, because I think in the game that is one of the huge pieces of the bloater's aesthetic. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how we don't get it in the house.
It looks so good. It would look so good in like a dark environment too.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, that is basically the Last of Us 101. There's still tons of other stuff
Hmm.
that I think we just didn't want to spoil, or we didn't think would be relevant, or there's a whole second game. We just want to kind of focus on the stuff that we thought you had to know. Basically, like the first lesson. I don't think we'll have any other
No,
lessons, but
that's the
that is, yeah.
what you need to know.
That
We
is what we need.
still do recommend you at least go watch a walkthrough of the Pittsburgh section, play the game, whatever it may be.
The
Go
TV
take
show
in
is
the
fine.
property a bit more.
Yeah,
And if you do watch the TV show, we just told you the main differences of these parts here. So you'd kind of be like, oh, I don't expect that to be in the house now.
yeah. All right. I believe we have some voicemails.
We do. Just one today. Let's get it kicking.
What's up, HHN 365? This is Thomas calling. Calling at like 2:45 in the morning. I'm on my way to work. Back to listen to your newest episode. I've been meaning to leave a voicemail because I wanted to bring up something that I think Gus talked about the last episode, about the theme park loop. And I agree, the theme park loop last year was complete horseshit, pardon my language. Same 4 or 5 times was a little bit ridiculous. I would have to say my favorite park loop that they did was, I'm trying to think, it was either 2017 or 2018. They included the artist Dance with the Dead. Me and my fiance got into them, and their music is so good. And I'm grateful for University and HHN to like introduce me to this wave of music. Like I love that kind of like no singing, just a synth wave type, and hearing that music like all throughout the park those 2 years, or that one year was great. I mean, I don't know if you guys agree, but Dance to the Dead was probably my favorite artists, like hearing their songs that year, because it fits so well. Like just hearing the eerie synthwave music, and then like listening to more of their other stuff. It's like, man, like I can see why Universal chose their music to like play around the park. But anyways, gonna get back to listening to the news episode. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Duff and I both absolutely love synthwave, so I totally agree. Um, the park-wide loops those years were
Yeah.
have just like you. I discovered so many great artists just from I listened to those loops just driving around all the time.
Oh,
So
yeah. I mean, 28 was nice. You kind of get a little introduction to the synth wave with some IP music as well. And then 29, they just went full on.
Yeah.
Here's a synth wave loop for the entire park.
Yeah, and we are also, I think some of us like it better than others, but some of us definitely agree that last year's wasn't the best for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it's not everyone's vibe. I kind of did like the vibe. Again, my big issue with last year's was it was extremely short and repetitive because of that. So,
But yeah,
29 knocked it out of the park by being great and long.
Thank you so much for listening, and thanks so much for your voicemail.
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
Definitely appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right, I think that basically sums it up. Guys, you think we're getting an announcement this week?
I am going to say yes. I'm not going to put money on this one, but I'm going to say yes. Another Thursday announcement, because I think we're going to get Thursdays all year now.
Oh, well, that's not great for releasing podcasts.
No, it's not.
But you'll hear about the Thursday announcement the next week when we release on Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
So,
Jonathan, what do you think this week?
I do think this week, and I do think Thursday. As much as I don't like the Thursday announcements in terms of obviously the podcast, how we release episodes, I at least do like the consistency. Hopefully, that at least every other week we can like just instead of people like going every day like Wednesday announcement. Everyone at least for now until for a little bit is just gonna be like, I'm gonna wait for Thursday and then I'm gonna ask for Wednesday announcement. I think that's gonna make the announcement season a little bit more easy to easy to digest when you only have one day you're thinking they're going to make an announcement compared to 7 days of the week.
Yeah, definitely. At least I mean, first of all, just having an announcement, I'm happy that it's not just angry, give us a fucking announcement nonstop now. But yes, knowing the exact day helps even better for sure. And then you didn't say, Mike, what do you think, coming this week or not?
I think so. Are we speculating which one we think it's going to be, or we just?
No, we'll leave it at that for now. Okay. We'll leave it at that for now. We don't want to get too deep in,
Fair enough. Oh yeah, I think it's coming. All right. Well, as always, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at HHN365 and at TikTok at HHN365pod. We have an amazing Discord. Please join us. A lot of speculation, a lot of discussion. It's only going to pick up from here now that we're getting into announcement season. And I'm sure there's going to be meetups and all sorts of things throughout.
And our monthly event.
Yeah, our monthly event. So definitely check it out. And we have a merch shop. Keep an eye on that at hhn365.com and leave us a voicemail at 407-906-4134, and we'll always play it on the show. And we'll see you in the streets.